Antarctica is the planet's harshest, most desolate and least explored continent. This frozen desert has hosted countless myths, legends and mysteries throughout history and has repeatedly claimed the lives of those who tried to explore it. The existence of Antarctica is no longer the secret it once was. It awaits those who want to explore it beneath the planet. But you are not allowed to discover it. In fact, you are not even allowed to go there with your hands free. But why? Why do countries try to keep this glacier-covered continent out of sight like a hidden treasure? Or are there some truths behind all this that they don't want anyone to know except a certain group? Today, we will travel together to the frozen south of our world and try to unravel the stories told about Antarctica and the facts behind them. And at the end of this journey, while many questions in your mind will be answered, new ones will be born to be solved. Welcome to 0 Hour. In the 100th year of Christ, we encounter an extremely important Greek sage, Claudius Ptolemy. You may have heard him more commonly as Ptolemy or Ptolemy. He is an extraordinary character who is considered an astronomer, mathematician, geographer, astrologer, and philosopher. Ptolemaeus spent his hunger for knowledge among the scrolls in the famous Library of Alexandria in Alexandria, the knowledge center of the ancient world, where he spent most of his life and left us dozens of pieces of information in various fields as a legacy. But there is another very interesting claim he made regarding our video today. He is the first person in history to talk about a huge piece of land in the south of the world, and he mentions this continent as Terra Australis Incognita, that is, the unknown southern lands, in his work titled Geography. And how could this man make such an assumption? You're asking how he could tell us about the South Pole, which no one even knew existed behind the vast oceans, when information about the continents of the world was so limited at that time, right? In fact, this extraordinary claim of Ptolemy was based solely on science. Of course, it's science from almost 2,000 years ago, but it's still science. Ptolemaeus adopted the statements of Aristotle, who lived 400 years before him, that the world was round, and the idea that there should be serious weights at the north end and south end in order for the world to remain in balance due to its roundness. Aristotle should also be congratulated. He made a very good inference without knowing the emptiness of space, and that the planet is not actually on a surface, but in a kind of floating in the air. Eratosthenes and Hipparchus, who lived approximately 200 years after Aristotle, calculated and presented the size and circumference of the world very accurately. Yes, friends, 2,200 years ago, men calculated the shape of the world, its circumference, etc., using basic physics and mathematics, even with the limited resources they had. That's why, after all this time still making comments about the shape of the world, you know what I'm talking about, are truly outdated and contrary to science and logic. Thanks to the knowledge of these scientists, Ptolemaeus claims that there must be a large landmass in the south, considering that the continental mass in the known world is largely in the north. He called this the theory of balance. Also, such an idea was more common in Greece at that time. Accordingly, there was a large landmass surrounding all the seas in the world. For this reason, the seas were actually inland seas within this piece of land. That's why he thinks that there must be a land beyond the giant oceans that is their border. These are the people today who think that the world is flat and that there is a giant wall at the poles, who take this ancient Greek mistake and sell it left and right today as if it were real. This is the reason for my reaction to this claim. The reality of most people has turned into unsupported claims presented in 20-second TikTok videos. Please be careful about these and do your own research in any way, especially using artificial intelligence. Ptolemy's idea of this mysterious unknown southern land turned into a myth and a goal over the centuries, and especially European sailors competed to be the first people to discover it. Thanks to the maritime techniques developed in the almost 1,300 years that have passed, the age of discovery begins and brave sailors set out to the vast seas to explore unknown lands, and we come across maps that begin to present our planet to us in detail. Maps showing the coast of North America, maps showing Asia, and increasingly larger maps showing all of these together. The mysteries of the world seemed to be unraveling. Until, in 1511, Piri Reis, the great navigator of the Ottoman Empire, shook the world with an extremely mysterious map. The famous and mysterious map showing Antarctica, whose existence is not even known before it was covered with ice. Piri Reis, one of the most critical names of the navy during the years when the Ottoman Empire, that is Devlet-i Aliye, was at the peak of its power, completed his work called Kitab-ı Bahriye. It is an extremely valuable maritime work, containing extremely detailed maps for its period, as well as information such as navigation information, port information, geographical information, and natural events. In 1513, Piri Reis, who was doing research for his book, presented another large map to the Sultan of the period, Yavuz Sultan Selim, an extremely comprehensive map that even includes information about the American continents. You know this map as the famous Piri Reis map today, but actually, what you see is just a small part of a larger map. However, this small section reveals the part of the African continent facing the Atlantic Ocean, which was extremely valuable for its period, and the eastern sides of North and South America. But we see another interesting piece of land at the bottom of the map. We know today that Antarctica is there. But how could Piri Reis have drawn this mysterious continent, which at that time consisted only of myths? Moreover, without the ice layer that is said to have existed on it for millions of years. It's not possible, is it? Behind this, there must be information coming from the astral world or drawings from an ancient advanced civilization. And you may be thinking that this famous poet of the Ottoman Empire must have accessed this information somehow, normal, because such claims have been made for years to add mystery to the subject. However, the facts are actually much simpler. While making the map, Piri Reis did not receive any information from aliens, lost civilizations, or beings from the astral world. As he openly mentions in his book, he only compiled the information he received from previous sailors. Well then, how did this man draw Antarctica? Those who say that no one could discover it at that time are wrong about this. Who told you it was Antarctica? Forums on the internet, mysterious videos, etc., right? However, since it represents Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, the most extreme region of South America, and since the continent has not been fully explored yet, Piri Reis made a mapping error and extended the undiscovered parts of the region to the bottom of his map, because at that time, the extreme shape of the continent had not yet been fully discovered. This is a mapping error that we encountered in a few places at that time. As a matter of fact, when the map is corrected with today's computer modeling, we now know how compatible the drawing is with the eastern side of South America. So there is no mystery in Piri Reis's map as you think. In fact, as I said, he also mentioned the sources he used while drawing his map, and there are no aliens among them. Even though there is nothing mysterious about the map, I think it was an extremely important resource for those times. I wish we had discovered those places before Europe, when the Ottoman Empire was at the peak of its power. Then we would be living in a completely different world order. We may not have found the mystery we were looking for in Piri Reis's map, but the Orontius Phineas map published in 1531 complicates things a bit. Because once again, we see a southern continent that clearly resembles Antarctica and is not covered with ice, and it's actually under both Africa and South America. Oronte Fine, a French mathematician, astronomer and cartographer, stated that he benefited from the notes and drawings of Ptolemy Ustan, Christophe Colomb, and Amerigo Vespucci, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, when he prepared his new and complete map of the world in 1531. Now, I told you that the myth of the mysterious land in the south has been around since the time of the Greeks. That's why you often see a continent at the southern end on old world maps like this. Even though no one discovered it, this phenomenon was adopted as a basic pattern by many European cartographers. We can think that the situation is no different on this map, but there is an interesting point here. The shape of the continent on Finn's map seriously resembles the appearance of Antarctica only after humanity mapped the ice-free state of Antarctica with high technology in the 1990s. This is still a matter of debate. Researchers to whom? They say Fine actually drew the Australian continent, which is very unlikely, because European explorers only discovered Australia almost 100 years after Fine. Once this possibility is eliminated, we are left with two possibilities. Well, Fine took the lost southern continent issue, which has been cliched for years, drew a continent in his mind and, coincidentally, made it look like today's ice-free Antarctica. Or maybe Fine was actually able to draw what Antarctica looked like before it was covered in ice. Even though it sounds impossible, an academician who would live hundreds of years after Fine would take this possibility very seriously. And the famous philosopher who lived thousands of years ago would claim to have found Atlantis, an advanced utopia that the wise Plato told us about in his notes. Charles Hutchins Hapgood, born in 1904, is an academician who studied history at Harvard University and later became a professor of history. Although he was a history professor, Hapgood had two other great interests: ancient maps and geology. He spent years trying to solve the mystery of the lost continent of the South, which appears on centuries-old maps, and produced an interesting theory by scanning hundreds of pieces of information, from ancient Greek myths to the map of Orontius Phineus. According to Hapgood, the global cartographic techniques used in these ancient maps were far ahead of their time, and he had also drawn exceedingly well the coastlines of the continents, especially what he thought was Antarctica. Hapgood, who blends this and similar data with historical myths, claims that an advanced civilization that lived before the Ice Age inherited some techniques to humanity. Yes, the theory of pre-flood civilization, you know. According to Gowda, this civilization had advanced maritime techniques, and its mainland was the mysterious southern lands targeted by Orontius Phineus and the Greeks. But there was only one difference. According to Gowda, the frozen continent known as Antarctica in the modern world was not there at that time. It was located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in a much more temperate and habitable place, and hosted a very developed civilization. This civilization, with its advanced maritime skills, reached both the American continents, Europe and Africa, and shared ancient knowledge with other people there. During the Younger Dryas period, known as the Flood, after the events that took place 12,000 years ago, the huge continent shifted to the southern tip of today's world and was covered with ice. Continental drift? Other academics viewed Hapgood's claim as nonsense at the time. How could huge continents move? They said this was scientifically impossible and nonsense. However, what they did not know was that the continents were constantly moving. This claim does not actually belong to everyone. Alfred Wegener first put forward the theory of continental drift in 1912. But at that time, the scientific community rejected this claim as nonsense. Later, in the 1950s, with the Ocean Floor Mapping Project, cracks in the ocean floor were noticed in the decades that passed. In 1968, the theory of plate tectonics put forward by Robert Parker and Dan Mackenzie was formulated, and in the 1970s, GPS technology proved that the continents were moving very slowly indeed. That's why science is variable, friends. It is not fixed, and science progresses by open-minded people, not with academics who have become dinosaurs and cannot get out of their molds. Look, in 1912, Wegener was made fun of by his colleagues, but it was proven true in the 1970s. That's why when someone talks about extreme scientific things, it is always approached with a possibility of truth. Try to scientifically disprove or confirm that idea. Don't say it's ridiculous just because the idea is wild or there is no evidence yet. In the future, you will see that it will become a scientific law. You never know. Being open-minded, both in science and philosophy, moves humanity forward. Don't forget this. However, there is a difference between continental plate tectonics and the claim of the HEP code. Continents move very, very small each year. For this reason, only after millions of years do we begin to see changes in the continental shapes of the world. But according to Hapgood, the huge Antarctic continent, almost the size of the North American continent, suddenly shifted to the South Pole Circle. This is a claim that truly pushes the boundaries. Hapgood supports this claim as follows. There is a molten layer called the asthenosphere, approximately 200 to 400 kilometers below the lithosphere, which is the uppermost layer of our Earth on which we live. And the plate technology movement takes place thanks to this layer. But Hapgood puts forward the following claim. Whatever happened 12,000 years ago, which was an event of unimaginable magnitude, the entire lithosphere layer of the Earth shifted at an extremely high speed and took its current form. The terrible destruction caused by this shift went down in history as a flood. You will even see that this claim was later mentioned in the book Adam and Eve, written by Chen Thomas. I added the video in the description section. Please watch it. It is truly an extreme claim and almost scientifically impossible with our current knowledge of geology. I specifically say almost because theoretically it is actually something that could happen. For example, there may be dramatic changes in the axis of our world due to the gravitational effect of an exoplanet that will enter the solar system and pass close to the Earth. And in the meantime, such a slide could occur with giant breaks in the crust. Another possibility is that the Earth passed through a very high-energy nebula or gamma-ray route, and the high-energy particles heated the core and layers of the planet, causing the fluid astronosphere to become more liquid and the crust layer to shift according to the centers of gravity, like a stone on ice. Really extreme scenarios, and God knows what will remain of the planet in such cases. That's why Hapgood's theory was generally ignored. But our knowledge about geology is still very limited. That's why it's too early to say, as old scientists did, that this is all crazy nonsense, or there may have been a disaster that we don't know about. This idea, put forward by Hapgood, later became associated with the lost continent of Atlantis, and the idea that there may be traces of ancient civilizations under Antarctica's approximately 5-kilometer-long ice cover suddenly begins to take place in popular culture. In fact, Good wasn't the only reason why this idea was sparked, because we know that the Nazis made various expeditions to the South Pole region before World War II, and thereupon the largest Antarctic landing in history was planned and implemented by the American Army in 1946 and 1947. The secretive high jump operation led by the famous Admiral Richard Byrd has begun. And what you know today, it also gave rise to all Antarctic myths. After thousands of years of myths, the idea of the mysterious lost lands of the South was finally proven by the Russian Imperial Navy in 1820. And the Antarctic continent is officially discovered by humans. From this day on, countries line up to explore this region with the most difficult climatic conditions in the world. The first comprehensive exploration was carried out by Admiral Byrd between 1928 and 1930, and a research and military base called Little America 1 is established in the Rosebush Heath region of the continent. In the following years, Byrd organized several more expeditions to the region, but Americans weren't the only ones investigating the mysterious continent. The Nazis also organized expeditions to the region in 1938 and 1939. Although many stories say that the Nazis also searched for Atlantis, they actually went there for the region's natural resources. The Nazis, who were preparing for war, needed large amounts of whale oil and various raw materials, and they planned to get them from this deserted continent. However, with the start of the World War, this transmission line was cut off before it even started. The only real information that adds mystery to the events is that, in the last years of the war, when the Nazis realized that the end was coming, various military technologies and, according to some even Hitler, were smuggled from Germany to bases in Antarctica and from there to Argentina and Chile. Of course, this is not a claim with definitive proof. However, there are serious sources about some high-ranking German officers escaping to South America and changing their identities. So we cannot say that this entire theory is a lie. Who knows, maybe they really hid some technologies under the ice. But whether it is because of these secret Nazi technologies, the Atlantis myths, or completely unrelated reasons, right after the war, America sends a large fleet of 4,000 soldiers and scientists to explore Antarctica and the most comprehensive experiments the region has ever seen begin. Basically, the information given to the press is presented as testing of cold weather technologies, examination of the climatic and geological structure of the region, and various scientific research. But according to some, there is a much more secret side to the operation: to make contact with highly civilized creatures that live under kilometers of thick ice. In the stories told, it is told that Admiral Byrd entered one of these large underground holes during his exploration with his plane and was welcomed there by an advanced civilization, gave a speech, and was left again after sharing information. During this chaos, there was even a conflict with these beings above. You can find all these details in my Operation High Jump video. Of course, all these alien claims and claims that there is a civilization there did not emerge as a result of a single expedition. Over the next several decades, ice core analyzers discovered that Antarctica was indeed once a temperate continent covered with tropical forests and a wide variety of creatures. It was even discovered that its location was not there, but in more temperate equatorial regions. Geological research also discovered that the shape of the land under the ice resembles the Orontius Phineas map drawn almost 500 years ago. Of course, not exactly, but it doesn't remind me of it. When all these discoveries come together, people literally begin to go crazy for Antarctica. Hapgood's theories and claims are suddenly accepted without question. Dozens of books suddenly appear on the market about the idea that an ancient civilization is waiting for humanity there. And Antarctica suddenly becomes the world's biggest mystery. And while all this Antarctica craze was at its peak worldwide and people were dying to go there and discover all its mysteries, in 1959, the Antarctica Treaty was hastily signed in Washington with the participation of 12 countries. And the entrances and exits to the continent were closed to people, as you know. People get suspicious, right? The war is over, technology is available. Why is it forbidden to go there instead of exploring it? Why can't planes fly over it? What's hiding there? Especially since photos of such interesting formations have begun to circulate all over the internet thanks to satellite technology. In fact, it would be beneficial to deal with the issue with a sound mind first. Otherwise, you'll get lost in paranoia and conspiracy theories. Let's start in order. One of the biggest reasons for the international interest in Antarctica, which started after America's research, was actually the efforts of the states to seize the regions and extremely rich resources there. Let me give you a simple example. All of Russia's known oil reserves are 80 billion barrels. However, it is thought that the oil in the Ross Sea region alone in Antarctica is 50 billion barrels. I'm not even counting the other coasts and inland areas. During the great industrialization period after the World War, an attack here could have triggered a new war between countries and, of course, would have destroyed the natural life. For this reason, the Antarctic Pact was signed, and it was decided that countries could not use the natural resources of the region or conduct military activities on it. Other articles of the agreement also include the clause that the region will be used for scientific studies with the approval of the member countries and that any data found will be shared among the member countries. So that deal is actually a really good deal. Now, if only America and its allies had made the agreement, we would say there is something wrong with this. But even then, countries that were against each other signed it. Today, this number has increased even more. So, rather than hiding a mystery there, it seems more logical to attack resources and prevent possible conflicts. What about Admiral Byrd's high jump operation, his contact with aliens, and even the conflict events? The people who claim that Admiral Byrd wrote these things in his diaries are actually just people who wrote various books and made programs to make money during that Antarctic madness. Normally, there is no such information in the Admiral's logs. In fact, listen to the man's own narration on the television program he appeared on, the most valuable and important place in the world for science. For this reason, all scientific groups are very interesting in their countries. But what is more important than this depends on the future of the country, because this is a resource where there is no communication with natural resources. As I said, all those talk about underground civilization and conflict broke out are completely fabricated and made up by the types who put out 2 books and hit the volley. The admiral's family and friends also made statements about these issues, and it was proven that the diaries claimed by the authors did not actually exist. In fact, none of the authors have ever shown the diaries they claimed to have obtained. The reason why flights over the continent are prohibited is because the weather conditions in the region are extremely dangerous. Since it has a magnetic pole, it will damage electronic devices and endanger flights, and there is no runway to land in the huge area in case of an emergency. Remember that Antarctica is almost as big as North America. It is also, of course, a ban developed to prevent other countries from secretly flying over the continent, landing in the center, and doing some secret business. That's why this data is checked not only in America, but also in member countries. The issue of not allowing civilians into Antarctica is not entirely true. For scientific studies, 56 countries included in the agreement can conduct research there with permission. Among them is Turkey. If you say you want to go as a citizen, Antarctica tours are offered for very high prices. You can even go to some shores, but it is forbidden to go towards the center. If you think that it is around -80 degrees in winter and -20 degrees in summer, you will understand why. An absolute death will be waiting for you. As for the mysterious formations seen in satellite photographs, it is one of the images you will often see on the internet. For example, this, an alleged image of a spaceship that appears to crash into the ground and drift. Although this claim has become popular, it appears that the uncropped image is actually a rock rolled down the mountainside. What about pyramid shapes? This is where it could get really interesting. Of course, if it were outside Antarctica. Normally, it is difficult to see sharp edges in nature. Air and water abrasion softens the edges, but except for ice corrosion. Glacial erosion literally works like a razor, cutting even the hardest rocks with sharp edges. That's why, in various parts of the world, you see that mountains in areas that were once glaciers have sharp edges. Also, remember, what you see is actually the top of the Ellsworth Mountains that is not buried under the snow. So there is a huge mountain underneath. What about mysterious tunnel entrances? That's right. Yes, there are dozens of photoshopped fake images, but there are also large cave entrances on the continent that open in summer and close in winter. But as you can appreciate, calling them alien landing pads is wrong. They may also be natural glacial caves. It would be wrong to comment before going there. In short, almost everything you've heard about Antarctica. Let's leave some room for Channel Gizm Channel. 99% of them are internet legends that people told without showing evidence, without showing a few historical records, and most of them turned out to be lies, just like the story of Admiral Byrd's diary. This is an industry in America, friends. These guys write books like this and appear on shows and earn a lot of money. I have told you similar stories many times on the channel. That's why, when you appear on a program and sit back and say that there are aliens in Antarctica, the Nazis went and met with them, then America fought with them, then going there was banned because there is a giant wall there, you are making a soup of all the fake information floating around and presenting it to people. The Nazis went because they needed to store fat before the war. America went because it wanted access to those resources. Countries banded together to ban this by agreement because it would likely trigger the Third World War. The giant ice wall deer comes from the belief of ancient people who did not know the world 2,000 years ago, that there was a large landmass around the planet. In short, there is an answer to all that has been said. Just do your research. But one thing truly protects my planet. Could there really be traces of a civilization under 3 to 5 kilometers of glacier? This is actually the only issue that can be discussed. Could the continents really have shifted during the extraordinary period called the Flood, which occurred 12,000 years ago as Hapgood's theory? Yes, it's an extreme claim, but it's intriguing. And could Atlantis, which was said to be an island country at that time, have slipped into the South Polar region and froze? Today, science says this cannot happen because the continent has been covered in ice for millions of years. And it shows us that the last time Antarctica was actually close to the equator was 200 million years ago, when the continents were close to each other. But was there anyone on the planet 200 million years ago? That's what we don't know. Maybe there really was a civilization and they disappeared over time. Normally, in such a long time, not a single trace remains of any civilization. Nature sweeps away, but the continent has been frozen for millions of years, so some things may have been preserved. We can only discover this if the ice of this huge area thaws one day. Otherwise, drilling through 3 to 5 kilometers of ice and conducting research at -80 degrees would be a very difficult test, especially in an area of 16.6 million square kilometers. Here are the facts about Antarctica that we know. The continent is truly an extremely mysterious region, even if there are no aliens or Nazis involved, especially from a scientific perspective. And it seems that as long as that ice is there, the continent will continue to maintain its mystery. And this means it will continue for a long time. But who knows, maybe one day something will reveal itself to us under the ice that has thinned due to global warming. That's when something tangible is discovered. Be sure, I will make the first video. After all, the purpose of the channel is to research and discuss the unknown. But unfortunately, almost all the information floating around right now is clickbait garbage. Of course, I don't believe in the slightest that states share everything honestly with us. That would also be naivety. But to say that there are highly advanced aliens in a frozen desert just because we don't trust governments seems a bit far-fetched to me. Because I could not find even a single conspiracy theory claim with a tangible basis. All of them are claims that are generally presented to us by a single source and remain in the air or are easily refuted. And remember, the continent is controlled not only by America, but also by dozens of countries. So, no one can run around there as they please. I think rival countries would disclose this immediately. If you have done research on the continent and have some tangible information that I have not mentioned today, please write it in the comments and let's discuss. After all, we are really talking about a mysterious, frozen land that is 98% unexplored. Who knows, reason is superior to reason. Maybe we can catch something from one end. Thank you all for watching the video. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel for similar content. Take care until we see you next week.